morning, my fellow treasure hunters and explorers. Today I'm going to talk about the Atocha, the famous treasure ship that went down off in the 1600s off the Florida Keys, that was found by famed treasure hunter Mel Fisher. I'm going to give a quick overview of the Atocha and what was found on it, and then talk about why this is important and how that applies to treasure hunters today. Okay, the ship was sunk by a hurricane in 1622. Even to this day, they are still looking for a large part of the treasure. There's a large part of the treasure that is still missing. For instance, there was, I think they said, 84 pounds of emeralds that were sunk on the Atocha, and to this day, only about 4 pounds have been recovered. The Nuestra Señora de Atocha and 8 other ships were sunk by a hurricane off the coast of Key West, Florida on September 5th, 1622. Now the Spanish were able to recover some of the treasure from some of the ships. And in fact, they did know where the Atocha went down and they had it marked. But then another hurricane came in and moved the ship and they lost track of where it was. And it wasn't until 1985 that Mel Fisher's son actually located a portion of the wreck. Another ship was found in 1980, but it wasn't until 1985, after an exhaustive search, that the Atocha was finally found. So in all, it took Mel 16 years to find the Atocha from the time he first started looking for it. The mother lode that Fisher's son found was worth more than $450 million, and it held more than 40 tons of gold, silver, emeralds, and other artifacts. Why is this important? What interest does that have to treasure hunters all across the West and across the United States and even in other parts of the world? Well, the treasure from the Atocha came from all over North and South America. There was gold from Peru, gold and silver from the western states, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Nevada. There were emeralds from Colombia. We know that there were silver from the mines in Mexico. If you follow my channel, you will also know that I've talked about in the past that there were silver bars that were found in Utah that had some of the same markings on them as those that were found on the Atocha. I have an acquaintance that has one of these silver bars, and it has some of the same symbols on that bar. I've held it in my own hands and seen it, and it has some of the same symbols and marks on it as those that came off of the Atocha. It's also known by treasure hunters in Utah that Mel Fisher came to Utah in the 1990s. He came in 1993 and 1994 time period, and he met with a guy that I was friends with, that I talked with, George Thompson. I have a good friend, a friend by the name of Steve Warby, that also actually worked for Mel Fisher while he was here. Steve was an old tunnel rat from Vietnam, and Mel had him go with him and look for some of the caves and some of the mines. There was a Native American guy who was also involved that I know of, that I met. He's no longer with us, but he was a veteran, and he also witnessed some of the things that went on when Mel Fisher was here. Mel Fisher met with the Ute tribe while he was here to try to get permission to go into some areas. And from the information that we've gleaned, we believe that Mel had a map that came from the Atocha that showed where some of the treasure on the Atocha came from. and that's why one of the reasons he came to Utah was to find where this treasure originated from. Now, it's my personal belief and the belief of some of my friends that are familiar with what went on, that Mel Fisher was looking for a couple of really valuable mines, but he was also looking for some of the vaults where the treasure was being stored previous to it being shipped to the coast for transfer. And that this map that Mel had perhaps had the locations of these vaults shown on this map. Anyway, that's what one of the individuals that actually saw this map was under the impression, was that he was looking for more of the storage places rather than the actual mines, that he wasn't really interested in mining. He was interested in finding the locations that the treasure was being held before, prior, or as it was being shipped, and that there was some indication that there were large quantities that were being stored and where it was coming from. And so this may play out, and there may be other areas where this same exact thing was going on, and I'm sure that there was many other areas where there were vaults or caches. We know that the Spanish were battling constantly with the English and with the French, and that they were raising money and losing money, and that their pirates were stealing their ships. Ships were being lost to hurricanes. Many years during the war with England, they couldn't ship things across for fear of being taken by pirates, by pirates that were endorsed by the Crown of England, and privateers that were sailing the Main, trying to prevent the Spanish from refilling their coffers. We know that the Spanish, there's evidence that the Spanish were here in Utah in the early 1600s. I have a friend that recently found a coin that was a Spanish coin that was dated 1624. So obviously the coin didn't show up here in 1624. It had to have been a year, at least a year later. It would have taken at least a year to get here if it was taken directly from Spain. However, it does show that the Spanish were here early. Almost certainly the coin was lost between 1624 and 1700. We have records of the several of the expeditions, the Spanish expeditions into the western United States. We know the Escalante expedition was in 1776, and that's when the crossing of the Fathers was opened up as a route and allowed the Spanish a quicker entrance into the state of Utah, into the southern Utah region. And so a lot of mining and exploration, I'm sure, went on shortly after that period of time. Documentation of that. We've found stone maps, we've found petroglyphs, glyphs left with dates, initials, and we have old documents and waybills that talk about these things, as well as we've found initials of the same individuals that were on these waybills. And so, at least in my mind, it's settled history. So why is that important? Well, if there was caches and things created and shipped that were found on the Atocha from Utah, I'm sure there were things that were cached in Nevada and Arizona and Mexico and New Mexico and all over the West that were done in the same way. The Spanish couldn't always ship things because of their wars and because of the hurricane season, because of different factors in their own administration. When they recalled the Jesuits, there was a period of time where things were really crazy. There was a period of time when there were at least two major Indian revolts, when the Indians rose up against the Spanish that were enslaving them or trying to force them to accept their religion, where they rebelled and drove the Spanish out. It took a number of months and years before the Spanish were able to get back safely into these areas and begin mining again and begin doing their different trading and the activities that they were engaged in. And so we can be assured that there were large periods of time where mining had to be stopped, where the gold and the silver that were obtained from mining had to be cached, and they had to have vaults and they had to have caches that they could recover and find. And from my own experience, I have learned that if you can figure out the pattern of one cache that was made by a certain group of Spanish miners, it very well could relate to another cache that they made. The same symbols, the same setup, the same triangulation and compass headings can be applied. And so it's very valuable information to learn about one small bit of information, because you can take that information and transfer it to a different location or site. And I'm going to give you a quick example of that. And this is a big clue that I've mentioned before, and I'm finding out more and more all the time how big of a clue it is. I mean, this is something that could resolve a problem, a cache site, or a site that you've been working on for many years. Try plugging into your site that you have the azimuth or the compass reading that you can do on Google Earth of 262.5. Try that. That's the declination that's on many of these old Spanish maps. And I've found that they use that in their cache sites. And so if you can decode enough information on the cache site, and you know where to pull that magnetic compass reading from, you may very well be able to find and place an X right over the location of where the cache is. Now, it's my speculation. This is just my speculation. I've never heard this from anybody else. I've mentioned it to some of my friends and acquaintances, some of my fellow treasure hunters, but this is something that I've come up with and that I believe firmly from what I've seen, is that the individual miner, padre, priest, or whoever was doing the mining, that they had their own methods and means of hiding, protecting, or preserving what they had, their own means. And yet for the king or the church or whatever was supposed to be the tithe that these miners were supposed to pay, had to be a set configuration, so that when the soldiers that were, I believe there was a shipping company or a group of packers that all they did, they were employed by the king, and all they did was they went from mine to mine to gather the king's fifth, his quinto, his 20%. And I believe that each one of these mining sites had to have a cache specifically for the king or for the crown, and that cache site had to be according to royal decree or specifications, so that whoever was coming to pick it up could locate it, recover it, and bring it back. And I have found that at least 3 sites now where the keys, the azimuths, the compass readings, and the cache configurations are identical. And the solution for one becomes the solution for another one. And so if you can identify these sites and find them, you can find where the caches were. Now the 3 sites that we've located so far that have these same identical solutions, they're all empty vaults. We found the vaults, but they're empty. So it was known. These vaults were known. They were used continuously, but they were also recovered continuously. And in most cases, they're probably empty. So if you get lucky enough to find a location where the Spanish were driven out, they died, the information was somehow lost, then you may be able to find one of these vaults or one of these caches. Now I think it's more likely that you will find a smaller cache or a cache left by the individual miner, the individual prospector, or an individual priest who owned some mines, or a family, because often those individuals died, or they left and they couldn't take it all with them, so they hid it, and then they were never able to come back. And that information would not be in the Spanish archives. It would not be in the king's records. So there wouldn't be anybody coming back to look for it. And I believe those are more difficult. Those are more difficult to find, but they're more likely to have something still in them than the caches that were ruled by the crown and recovered by the crown, because I believe they were recovered by the crown on a seasonal or several times a year basis, and that the records were kept about those locations, and even years later, even if things happened between countries or with the shipping or the hurricane season or the Indian revolts, those records were kept and amongst the church or amongst the crown, and they sent soldiers back when everything was cleared, when everything had settled down, to recover it. And so I don't know if this helps anybody out on their own projects, but this is just some of the things that we've been finding. And so I believe the real key to finding some of these things is to be able to decode the smaller sites that you may come across, to find the clues, to try plugging some of these different factors in, this 262.5, or using the rule of Mark-Lowio, triangulation. I know among the Spanish they had several declination points, several compass headings that they liked, and a lot of those were 300, 333, 303, 33. I've seen 32 degrees used. And so, but the individual miner, the individual priest may have their own separate means and methods of hiding things and recovering things that they don't want anybody else to know or understand. And so those are the type of individuals who are actually in the field, that were often massacred by the Indians, often died from exposure to the elements, or from bad water, or from mercury poisoning, or from many other accidents or problems, a mining accident. That is the kind of history that's being held within the families in the old world, within the small documents. And so anyway, if you have anything that you're interested in, you're working on, that's Spanish related or in the area of the western United States, send me your information and I'll help you if I can. I've had a few individuals send me information or glyphs or things from different parts of the United States, or attributed perhaps to different groups, the KGCs, the Masons, or some of those things. And I'm not an expert on those things. I don't deal with those things all the time. I've seen sites that could be related to those things. I'm working on a couple of sites that are kind of mystery sites, but you'd be a lot better off in that. I'll be happy to help you if I can, but you'd probably be a lot better off to talk to some expert or somebody that's dealt with that a lot in your own area. My area of expertise is the western United States, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, and mainly with the Spanish, the Jesuits, the Franciscans. And that's the research that I've been doing. That's the things that I'm interested in. And that's what I have most of the information and research in. But anyway, I hope this video's helped you in some way. The Atocha was a very important shipwreck. It set the stage for many other treasure hunts, for a lot more research. And I think in the future we're going to find out a lot more of these areas where treasure from the Atocha came from. It was well documented. The manifests were known, and the things that are still missing are still known. And so, you know, we know where a lot of the gold and the silver and the emeralds and some of the things that were on the ship came from. And hopefully we'll continue to find out more information about that in the future. I know that the research and the search for the Atocha and the rest of the treasure and the other ships is still ongoing, and there's still a lot of treasure out there in the Gulf to be found, as well as many other areas that I believe are being overlooked out in the oceans and the bays. But anyway, please like and subscribe and support this channel if you can. I've been really busy, and so I have a lot of information and things I want to get out there as I can. The summertime is my time for exploration and getting a lot of things done. And so there'll be a lot more in the field research type of videos coming out in the near future. Thank you. Have a great day.